Friends, let us now start looking at reactor design with few examples. That is, in the next few sessions, we will be looking at some real time reactor design situations and discussing how we go about designing the reactor. But before we do that, it is a good time probably to recap what all things that we have seen so far, so that how we put all these information together to get a meaningful reactor design will become more clear. So, we always started with writing a generalized representation of a reaction, and we did this, or we rather do this, because this allows us to deal with any reaction that we may have. So, leaving the specifics of the reaction aside for time being, we said that we have large number of species, let us say AJ, where the species can go from 1, 2 up to some number n. So, we essentially have chemical reactions within this species, and we talked about how we represent this reaction. So, that was our starting point, that is representation of chemical reaction. We said that suppose we consider a single reaction and associate a stoichiometric coefficient nu j with the species A j, then we can write a single reaction as summation nu I j A j equal to 0. By doing so, we are not a priori identifying reactants or products by writing them on the left hand side or right hand side of a reaction, but we are doing that by assigning nu j either a positive value if it is a product or a negative value if it is a reactant. Of course, when you have large number of species, it is unlikely that there is only one reaction occurring between them. So, we extended this representation to consider large number of reactions by saying that let me associate a subscript I with the reaction now, and nu I j is the stoichiometric coefficient of the species j in the ith reaction, and therefore, my ith reaction will be nu I j A j equal to 0, and I can go from 1 to up to r such reactions. Now, why R reactions, or what are these R reactions? The reactions that we are interested and that we will focus while representing this generalized form are only independent reactions. So, we do not want a reaction and the same reaction represented by multiplying the all the stoichiometric coefficient by a constant number except 0 to be part of our reaction scheme as two separate reactions. So, we eliminate all those, and how do we do that? We look at the rank of the matrix, stoichiometric matrix nu bar, and that rank tells me how many independent reactions are in my system. So, this was about how we represented the reaction. Then we spent little bit of time on looking at thermodynamics of the reaction. Now, why is thermodynamics important? It is important because it gives us what are the achievable conversions or limit to how we can how much reaction will progress. How do we measure the progress of a reaction? We defined variable alpha as extent of reaction, and then tried to seek what will be the limit on this extent of reaction when we have a chemical reaction such as nu j Aj equal to 0. And this led us to using free energy concept and saying that delta G, the free energy change, is delta G 0 plus R T ln product of, let us say if you are writing a gas phase reaction with ideal mixture behavior, P j raised to nu j, and to arrive at this equation we took help of chemical potential mu, related it for the species J to let us say in an ideal gas mixture, the standard condition chemical potential. So, what are the standard conditions? Reference pressure is usually 1 atmosphere, the temperature T of the mixture, and pure J as the component. So, now thermodynamics tells us that reaction will occur if free energy change is negative, and moment free energy change becomes 0, we have a equilibrium reaction. So, equilibrium of a reaction then is characterized by delta G equal to 0, and from this point onward we defined the equilibrium constant Kp, how it depends on the properties, for example Kpt. Then using this Pj partial pressure in terms of mole fraction into total pressure, bringing in the stoichiometric mass balances, we found out how we can find equilibrium extent of reaction. If there are large number of reactions, no problem, we have equilibrium extent of reaction for 1, for reaction 2, reaction 3 and so on, and thermodynamics tells us that if there are R reactions, then at equilibrium all individually each of these reaction is at equilibrium. So, we have R such conditions which allows us to calculate R unknown values of alpha. We also saw how this alpha changes, for example, how this alpha is dependent on the pressure of the system, is dependent on the heat of reaction, or rather how it is dependent on temperature, how it is dependent on the initial moles of the system and so on. So, the idea was that we have alpha equilibrium, and how can we change this equilibrium value of alpha, because if it is a reversible reaction, alpha E is some finite value. Now, if we want to increase this equilibrium conversion, so that we can realistically get higher conversions in our reactor, then we have to play around with the operating conditions such as pressure, such as temperature, the composition of the system and so on. And this largely depends on the heat of reaction. So, temperature effect, for example, is related to what happens if the reaction is exothermic, the equilibrium conversion decreases as temperature increases and so on. It also depends for gaseous reaction, for example, on change in number of moles, which is summation nu j, and that allows us to determine what should we do with pressure. Should we have low pressure reactions, high pressure reactions and so on. Thermodynamics also tells us about the heat of reaction and how it changes with temperature. So, armed with all this information, we then focused our attention on the kinetics of the reactions. Kinetics, that is the measure of rate of reaction, and this rate of reaction we defined for a closed system as how the what is the rate of change of extent of reaction with time, and defined it as an intrinsic variable by normalizing it with the volume of the reacting mixture. Depending on whether the reaction is homogeneous or heterogeneous, we can have different normalizing factors such as volume of the reacting mixture or the weight of the catalyst and so on. We are also then interested in what are the factors which influence this rate of reaction. So, for example, concentration, temperature and so on. And we saw a few basic kinetics such as law of mass action kinetics, power law kinetics, of which first order reaction for example is one of the specific case of power law kinetics. We then turned our attention to kinetics of complex reactions. Because in real life the reactions are display hardly ever simple behavior, or reactions are complex, and there are several reasons why reactions can be complex. For example, there can be large number of reaction and reactants. There can be number of steps through which reaction proceeds before we get our desired product, and all these contribute to kinetics and reactions being complex. Now, to deal with complex reaction kinetics and get what is the R or rate of this reaction, we essentially developed two concepts, namely quasi equilibrium approximation, where we say that if there is large number of reactions, then one or more than one are the rate determining steps, and all other reactions are the slow reactions, and all other reactions have attained their equilibrium. So, we have idea of equilibrium, but not for the entire reacting system, because if the entire reacting system attains equilibrium, our rate is 0. So, a quasi equilibrium. So, there are certain reactions which are slow. So, compared to these reactions, all other reactions have reached equilibrium, and that is quasi equilibrium approximation. The other idea is quasi steady state, and here we apply this idea to species rather than to the reactions. So, we say that dynamics of certain species is slow compared to other. So, those species which are highly reactive or whose dynamics is very fast, they attain their steady state much faster before the slow species can show any progress, measurable progress. So, we apply steady state, but if we apply steady state to all the species, the net rate will be 0. So, we apply steady state to few species which are highly reactive, and then use what we call quasi steady state approximation to attain the rate of reaction. And we illustrated this concept by taking few examples for catalytic reactions or polymerization reactions, catalysis reactions, and free radical mechanism reactions and so on. So, we then saw how we determine the kinetics of the reactions. We then turned our attention to looking at what happens in a reaction when we have more than one phase present in the system, namely heterogeneous reactions. So, we focused for example, so we looked at transport phenomena and how it influences the chemical reactions. And for this we looked at two different kind of two or three different processes. First was gas solid catalytic reactions. So, here we saw first of all what is happening when gas solid catalytic reactions are taking place, that is what are the various steps that gaseous molecule has to undergo before a reaction can take place. So, the catalytic component is on the solid, the reactants and products are in the gas phase. So, there has to be diffusion from bulk to the surface, from surface to the inside of the catalyst for the reactant, then the reaction and then diffusion of the product in the reverse direction. So, as a result of presence of all these mass transport or diffusional processes, the kinetics of the process is not just the kinetics of the chemical reaction or the intrinsic kinetics. It can get masked with the transport behavior, and therefore, we defined how we can combine these two and see what is the effect. For example, how do we measure whether mass transfer is limiting or not. So, we have for example, Thiele modulus, then we had concept of effectiveness factor and so on. We also applied the similar ideas to gas solid non catalytic reaction. Where we said that things like diffusion are still the same, except now the solid is not static, that is it is undergoing a change. It is undergoing a change in form of its shape, either particles are dissolving or something is getting deposited and so on. So, it becomes a dynamic process. So, to that extent it is different than catalytic reactions, but certain aspects such as diffusion and whether mass transfer controls or chemical reaction control remain the same. We also then looked at gas liquid reactions and ideas such as enhancement factor, effectiveness factor and so on. So, we started with kinetics, we then brought in transport and then we wanted to put all these things together. So, we started looking at chemical reactor design, and for this what we are currently discussing, we initially started with looking at mass and energy balances. Then we looked at what happens when you have non-isothermal operations, why these are important, adiabatic reactors, isothermal reactors or combinations thereof. So, having now acquainted ourselves with all this information, let us try to put all this information into practice by looking at various reactor design case studies. And the first case study that we are going to look at is that of thermal cracking of ethane in a tubular reactor. Now, why do we need to crack ethane? Ethane, for example, after its cracking gives ethylene, and I do not think I need to expand on why do we need ethylene. We need polyethylene, ethylene oxide, ethylene glycol and host of other products for which ethylene is a starting material. And at one estimate, the production of ethylene exceeds something like 20 million tons per annum. Slightly old information, maybe around 2004 or 5, this was the number I could get my hands on. Maybe the demand has increased further. So, what is the main reaction here? So, the main reaction for this is the cracking of ethane. So, ethane molecule C2H6 gives ethylene C2H4 and another molecule of hydrogen. Now, if you look at this reaction, clearly starting with one reactant mole, we get 2 moles of product. So, there is an increase in number of moles, and it is a gaseous reaction. So, increase in number of moles, for example, if you want to achieve high equilibrium conversions, one of the things that you can do is actually increase the total number of moles initially present by adding some inerts. And in this particular case, we add steam for it. So, we have steam added, although steam does not participate in the reaction, we add it as an inert to achieve higher equilibrium conversions. So, endothermic reaction, and the heat of reaction is plus 34.5 kilocalories per mole, fairly reasonably high value. Since it is an endothermic reaction, if you carry out an equilibrium, look at the equilibrium of this reaction, higher temperatures for higher equilibrium conversions. Now, if we have for example, we saw how to operate such reactors. In a batch reactor, we would have to progressively increase the temperature as function of time, or in a tubular reactor that would translate into increasing temperatures along the length of the reactor. Even if you do not want to increase the temperature, because this reaction is endothermic, what we will get is, as reaction takes place, and if you are not trying to control the temperature, there will be natural tendency for temperature to go down, because it will reaction will take away energy from the system. So, even otherwise we will have to somehow keep heating this system to maintain the isothermal temperature. And if you want to achieve these increasing temperature profiles along the length of the reactor, we will have to adopt some novel strategy, so that the temperatures not only remain same constant, but keep increasing along the length of the reactor. Another aspect of this reaction is that this is cracking, or this is not the only reaction that takes place. In fact, there are several side reactions which are possible, and this side reaction shown over here is 2 ethane molecules combining to give us a butane molecule and a methane molecule. Now, there are several such side reactions, but the point is that these reactions dominate at higher conversions. So, as our conversion increases, the side product also go on increasing, and this is shown in what we had earlier referred to as the yield versus conversion diagram. So, what we have here is, on the x axis is conversion of ethane, okay, on the x axis, and on y axis we have this one is H2 and ethylene moles per mole, 100 moles of ethane. So, we have that, and on the bottom is the methane. I discussed that is one of the side products in the reaction. So, what we see here is that as conversion is increasing, from example from 50% to 55 to 60, the moles of ethane and ethylene are increasing, okay. Moles of ethane and ethylene are increasing. But what we see is that as the conversions increase to 65 or 70%, there is much more rapid increase in the methane that comes out compared to the ethylene. For example, if you look at hydrogen or ethylene, it started saturating and more of methane or byproduct is coming into the system. What it implies is that two things. One is you do not want high quantities of methane. So, it implies that you have to stop your reaction at around 60% conversion. So, what it implies is that you have to stop this reaction at 60% conversion. That means, even though you have a possibility of converting 100% ethane. Now, remember this is a multiple reaction. So, 100% conversion of ethane does not mean equivalent amount of ethylene being formed. In fact, as this study shows, you will get at higher conversions more and more methane. So, the design objective, for example, here, that is X or conversion desired is not 100%, but roughly 60% or 0.6. So, that is one aspect. The second aspect that is also apparent, here we see the results at two different pressure. This is, let me just say, low pressure and this is high pressure. Now, why is this happening? Because there is an increase in number of moles. Lower pressure will favor higher equilibrium conversions. So, typically the operating pressures are on the lower side, but then there is also another limit. You can't have very low pressures. For example, can you do this reaction under vacuum, just for sake of argument? No, because under low pressures for gaseous reactions also means low concentrations, and which means low rates of reaction. So, one has to strike a balance between again getting higher pressure, higher rates of reactions and higher equilibrium conversions. So, pressure is also an important factor. Given all this, typical operating conditions for a ethane cracking reactor, which is shown over here, ethane furnace as it is called. I will explain what this furnace is, but typical conditions are: length is 95 meters, the gaseous flow rate or the flux is about 70 kg per meter square per second, inlet pressure is about 3 atmospheres, outlet pressure is about 1.2 atmosphere, and we will come back to this factor when we talk about design of this reactor. The inlet temperature is 680 and outlet is 820. So, it is progressively increased, and one tube, and I will explain what that tube is, gives you about 10,000 tons per coil. Now, how is this reactor fabricated? Now, when you say that length is 95 meters, one way of thinking that is an horizontal tube or a vertical tube. Horizontal is what comes to mind immediately, of the entire length occupying 95 meters. Now, that would take too much of a space, and the world where space has a premium, you do not want that. So, what do? You do not go horizontal, you go vertical, and this is precisely what is done in this reactor. So, let us look at what this reactor is. First of all, there is a axial symmetry, and so you have roughly the same things happening on the both sides of the reactor. And how is this reactor designed? There is an inlet at this point, and then the tubes are actually coiled. So, if you look at the cross section, it will look something like this. So, it is not a straight tube, but a coiled tube with the outlet coming out over here. So, if you look at the side view, this is what you will see. Okay. So, this is how the entire length of the reactor is achieved. So, instead of having a single long tube, you have a coiled coiled tube, and it is the same thing on both sides. Now, you also want fairly high temperatures. So, how do we achieve that? So, for that what we have on the sides, what you see here are actually flue gas burners, and therefore, these are what are called as furnaces. So, you are actually burning flue gases or passing flue gases, hot flue gases through the external of these coils, thereby achieving two things. One, achieving high temperature, and by controlling the flux, heat flux of each of these burner, you are now in a position to achieve different temperatures along the length of the reactor. Why is that? For example, if you again look at the side view, what we are seeing is that in this regime the heat flux will be, let us say, some H1. In this regime it will be H2. So, again these are the burners that you are seeing here, H3 and so on. So, we can have temperature T1 in this regime, temperature T2 in this regime, temperature T3 here and so on. So, essentially we have now therefore generated a profile of temperature along the length of the reactor. For example, if I say this is my low temperature to a high temperature. Now, how do we achieve exactly, how we can model this? At this point, let us not worry about how it is achieved. I will come to the model of this reactor itself, and then I will just mention how we can add to this model. So, these are our balances which we use for design of this reactor. What are these balances? These are our simple mass and energy balance and the momentum balance as well. Now, what is this mass balance? This mass balance is actually the same thing as dFj dV equal to Rj that we had seen earlier. We are assuming only a tubular reactor. Now, why are we dealing with Fj and not concentration Cj? The reason being, if you recall, when we talked about stoichiometric tables, we have increase in number of moles. So, F total, for example, at any point of time, that is, suppose you take this as a reactor and total moles that are entering is Ft0 and at any point of time is Ft, then this Ft is not same as Ft0. So, there is a change in number of moles which results into change in either the volumetric flow rate or change in concentration and so on. So, we deal with dFj dV, which translate into this equal to Rj. Now, what is Rj? Rj is a function of concentration, that is the reaction rate for the jth species. First of all, what are jth species? We list out all the species that are there, for example, ethane, ethylene, hydrogen, butane, methane and so on. So, those are the species. Rj is the rate of change of species j in all the reactions, and this is a function of concentration, temperature and so on. What is concentration? Concentration is Fj by the volumetric flow rate V or F prime. Okay, I have used the symbol F prime, so let us stick with that. So, this is nothing but Fj by F prime, concentration. So, we have mass balance equations in terms of Fj, we have rate which is in terms of concentration. So, we have to figure out what this F prime is. Okay. Second is the energy balance. Energy balance also is the same as the energy balance for a tubular reactor, except the term Q that was there, that is the heat added to the system, is now represented in terms of the flux Qj, Q of Z, that is what is the heat flux of those burners at various different locations, and since it is changing along the length of the reactor, we represent it as Q of Z, and of course, the contribution second term here in the energy balance represents the contribution due to all the reactions. Okay. So, that is my energy balance. So, I do not have an isothermal reactor, neither do I have an adiabatic reactor, but I am somehow going to achieve some temperature variation through use of these burners. Now, if you remember the configuration that we talked about, this is actually a reactor tube, tubular reactor with lot of bends and a long length of reactor. Okay. So, in this you can easily expect that there will be some pressure drop, and that is the reason we have to account for this pressure drop. Now, why do we have to account for this pressure drop? It will become clear in just a minute. So, what we have is the momentum balance which accounts for this pressure drop. This term is familiar, friction factor term, and this is to account for the bend, the pressure drop across the bend. So, zeta is that shape factor, pi RBI for example radius of this bend, and so on. So, we have now our momentum transfer, and momentum transfer has the velocity u for example, which is the flow rate f prime by A. And now, how do we get our flow rate f prime? We use our ideal gas law. For example, if you assume this as an ideal gas law, then the total pressure into f prime is Ft0 RT, a version of an ideal gas law for a flow reactor, where instead of volume you have the volumetric flow rate, instead of moles you have the molar flow rate. So, now my f prime is RT summation Fj, which is Ft0 divided by the pressure P, and now this forms my complete model. But it is interesting to see how different things are related to each other, and we will just look at the coupling between mass, momentum and energy balance. Okay. Let us start with the momentum balance. Now, one would think that why should the momentum get influenced by how the mass is changing in the reactor, but when we have the chemical reaction with change in number of moles, they are indeed connected. Now, how? You look at this pressure balance or the momentum balance, where this term tells us how pressure is changing along the length of the reactor, and this has velocity term and density term and so on. Now, what is the velocity? Velocity now, if you look at, is RT summation Fj by P. Fj coming from mass balance equation, temperature coming from energy balance equation. So, our momentum balance equation is coupled to mass and energy balance equation. Okay. Now, what about mass and energy balance? Of course, they are related to each other. Why? Because we said that Rj, look at the mass balance. Rj is a function of concentration. Concentration is nothing but the molar flow rate divided by F prime. Now, F prime is given by U into A, for example, and we see here that as for example, what is F prime? P F prime is F T 0 R T, right. So, F prime changes as pressure changes. So, this is my momentum balance term. So, this is now linked to mass balance equation because of its appearance in the R J term. And of course, we have already seen mass and energy balances are related, because the same rate of reaction is dependent on temperature. So, we have mass, momentum, energy balances completely linked to each other. We can of course do the same exercise for energy balance, and I leave it for you to figure it out. Or in other words, when we have such reactions in a reactor, there is a strong coupling between mass, energy and momentum balances, and this is the reason why you would see that the inlet, for example, pressure is 2.99, inlet pressure 3 atmospheres, outlet is only about 1.2, almost 50% or little more than 50% pressure drop. So, how does, for example, when you put all these things together, this is a typical simulation of the ethane reactor. So, what we have here is the length of the reactor 95 or typically 95, we have conversion x, then we have temperature along the length of the reactor, and we have total pressure P T. And what do we see? Conversion of course increases as time or as along the length of the reactor. Remember, we are talking about a tubular reactor here. So, conversion increases as we travel along the length, and how it is influenced by, for example, pressure which is decreasing, and temperature, which purposely we had modeled our furnaces or the fluxes, heat transfer fluxes, such that we get higher temperature or increasing temperature along the length of the reactor. And what we see here is the points, although you do not see those, these are the typical inlet outlet conditions. There is a fairly good match between the model simulation. So, for example, this will tell me that if I want to conduct my reaction up to 60% conversion, I have to have my reactor which is about 95 meters long, and in fact that is the kind of reactor lengths that are used. And on the side here is again yield conversion diagram for the industrial reactor. So, we have yield of ethylene over here and yield of methane and hydrogen. Now, remember, this is expressed in terms of kg per kg, and in terms of moles, the molar yields ethane and hydrogen ethylene and hydrogen should have been same, but in terms of mass they are of course different, hydrogen being much lighter than ethylene. Okay. So, this is as far as the design of an ethylene reactor is concerned. So, what we saw here is basically an homogeneous reaction. So, not much to be expected in terms of transport and all that, but still transport is indeed important, because if you look at this simulation, for example, if you had assumed constant pressure, you can imagine how much results would have been off, because your pressure is actually decreasing by more than 50%. So, this example for illustrates how do we use thermodynamic information, because there is an increase in number of moles, we have to have low pressures, inerts to achieve higher equilibrium conversions. We also saw that it is an endothermic reaction. So, increasing temperature profiles is desirable. So, how thermodynamic information is brought in? Kinetics of course is important. So, ethane cracking, for example, thermal cracking is a free radical reaction. So, it has been modeled accordingly and so on. And then bringing the mass, energy and momentum balances together to achieve the desired objective. Now, I mentioned that in this model we just assume that we are going to program our furnace to achieve this heat flux balances. So, what we are saying is, suppose this is my tube in which ethane is flowing and this is my shell, and I am just saying that there is going to be some heat transfer from here to here, which is Q of Z. Now, if I want to make this model more realistic, why do I bother about Q of Z? I can express it in terms of temperature of these flue gases that I am passing through. So, I can bring in the reference temp or TR temperature, which again will change along the length of the reactor, but this Q of Z then related to temperature difference between the inside the tube and outside the tube, or other way around, TR minus T. So, we can add one more balance for how TR changes along the length of the reactor. Now, that will depend on what is the burning rate of the flue gases or burning efficiency of the flue gases and so on. So, we can actually go on expanding the model in terms of the details that we want. But what we saw here was the base level model, where we say that we just assume that there is certain heat flux that we can achieve, and that changes along the length of the reactor. So, this was our first case study. Now, let us turn our attention to second case study, and I will just have a brief introduction in this session, and we will look at the kinetics in the next class. And this example is an example of a design of a batch reactor for hydrogenation of oil. Now, why do we need to hydrogenate oil? There are several reasons why oils are hydrogenated, and their major demand, for example, is in hydrogenated oils, or what we call dalda or vanaspati, or various different brand names. But basically it is for using oil as a margarine or shortening, that is substitute for butter, or shortening and so on, so as a cooking medium. Now, what is wrong with using oil itself? Of course, you can use oil, but as you know, oil at room temperature is liquid, and to transport, for example, this liquid is a major problem. So, one of the reasons why we can hydrogenate, because hydrogenated oils are in the solid form. So, if you want to transport them, that is much more easier. So, what happens when you hydrogenate oil? Now, what happens is the following. So, let us see what is oil. As you know, oils, for example, if you take cottonseed oil or any such oil, it is actually a triglyceride. So, it is a mixture of, or it is a ester of glycerol, whose basic backbone is this. So, if you had OH, we have glycerol, but it is a ester. So, we have an acetic, or we have an acid, so the basic hydrolysis reaction, for example, if you hydrolyze this, you get CH2OH, CHOH, CH2OH and so on. Now, this triglycerides, as you know, we are also looking at it as a source of biodiesel, and that is where the clash arises. Do we use it as a food or do we use it as a fuel? But let us keep aside that conflict for the time being. Let us focus on the reactor design. So, what are these different fatty acids? For example, these fatty acids are long chain aliphatic acids. So, what essentially we have, for example, if you have something like oleic acid, a cis oleic acid, it is so that is my cis oleic acid. So, long chain. So, total number of carbon is 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17, 18, C18. Okay. And there are various versions of this. For example, we could have a single double bond. So, what we call mono unsaturated acid, or a triple bond where which is a linoleic acid. So, I will just rub out this and say di-unsaturated fatty acids and so on. So, we have saturated fatty acids where there is no double bond. So, when you hydrogenate this oil, essentially what you are doing is you are adding hydrogen in the R prime group. So, this is my R prime. Okay. So, in the R prime. So, we have let us say di-unsaturated, then we have mono unsaturates, and then we have saturates. Now, why do we hydrogenate? As I said, it changes the density. It also makes it more stable by increasing the melting point. So, essentially we have solid. It also does another thing. It reduces the odor and changes the color to a pleasant color. So, we can actually get it as a pleasant edible material. If you are using margarine to spread it on your butter, you do not want something which is a pungent odor or something which is not appetizing, so to speak. So, we do it for changing the odor, we do it for changing the stability. So, where is the design here? Now, what happens is that if you hydrogenate and you start going from di to mono to saturates, now you may say that I will saturate it so that all there are no double bonds or triple bonds at all. Now, it turns out from the health perspective, it is desirable to have certain mono unsaturates in your oil. So, you do not want to saturate them completely, yet you do not want to leave them as di-unsaturated as well, because that would make them in the liquid form and so on. So, in the next session we will see how do we design reactors for this. Now, I will just mention at this point what we have here is a liquid, then we are going to say we are going to have hydrogen, so gas, and to add more complexity this requires a catalyst. So, we have solid, liquid, gaseous reacting system. So, we will see this as an example of a design of a slurry reactor, if you like to call slurry here, that slurry being of the catalyst. So, that will be the topic of discussion for our next session. Thank you.